Welcome to the Awakened Goddess Show, your source for inspiration, wisdom, and personal discovery. The place to learn from a diverse mix of mentors, metaphysical experts, spiritual leaders, and best-selling authors from around the world. I'm Angela Wilkinson, mindset mentor and founder of the Awakened Goddess Academy. Join me as I explore the minds of my masterful guests while they share powerful insights and easy-to-use tools you can start using right away. Now, let's tap into the energy of the Awakened Goddess and be enlightened by today's guest. Hey, I'm your host, Angela Wilkinson, and welcome to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. Nicole Jardim is a certified women's health coach and functional nutritionist. She is the creator of Fix Your Period, a series of programs that empower women to reclaim their hormonal health in a fun and sassy way. She's helped thousands of women from all around the world who are struggling with PCOS, infertility, amenorrhea, PMS, and much more. Rather than treating problems or symptoms, Nicole treats women by addressing the root cause of what's really going on in their bodies and minds. She passionately believes that the fundamentals to healing any hormonal imbalance lie in an approach that addresses the unique physiology of every woman. This is essential to reclaiming and maintaining feminine vitality at any age. And speaking of fertility, meeting Mr. Right can be super tough, especially when you keep attracting Mr. Wrong. With tons of ways to meet someone, it can be overwhelming and feel like a second job trying to keep up with it all. With the online dating, social media, and figuring out where you're going to meet him. What if it could be easier than that? What if your soulmate is closer than you think? What if there were specific steps you could take to pave the way for Mr. Right to find you? Join me for my upcoming workshop, and I'll share 5 powerful steps in my love attraction formula, giving you the keys to find true love in 2016. Grab your spot for class at theawakenedgoddess.com/webinar-registration, or just go to theawakenedgoddess.com and sign up there for this free class. And now let's talk to Nicole. Welcome, Nicole, to the Awakened Goddess Show. I am super excited to talk with you today because you, I hear, are the professional period fixer. So, perfect timing. Let's talk about this. So, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, first off, that is certainly a niche market. So why the heck, what inspires you to get into this work with this specialty?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so many things, but I will say that it began a long time ago, as these stories usually do. And I was pretty young, in my early to mid-teens, and a whole lot of hormonal health troubles began. And it was really one of those things for me where I had absolutely no idea what was wrong with me. And my mom just said, oh, well, this is all normal, like the painful periods that keep you in bed for 2 days. That's no big deal. You'll get over it eventually. Mine got better as I got older. And I just thought that all of these issues I was experiencing were normal. Other friends kind of had the same thing. So I just thought, okay, I'll just keep going as I go. And then a couple of years later, it got to the point where my period kind of stopped coming completely. It came maybe every 3 or 4 months. And I thought, okay, well, that probably isn't normal, but I had no awareness of my body, no understanding of how it really was supposed to work. So I had no gauge whatsoever. Finally went to see the doctor, and she ended up putting me on the pill because that was going to bring my period back and regulate it, quote unquote, regulate it. So I ended up being on the pill for about 5 years. And within those 5 years, my imbalances really shifted from almost like having too many hormones that were causing too many problems to having too little hormones. And of course, that just led to a whole host of issues because obviously hormones govern about 95% of the things that happen in our bodies. Ultimately, I got off the pill and really went on. I decided I really needed to clean up my diet and really change my entire life in order to get my health back and on track, because I'd been seeing all these doctors and nobody had any answers for me. And it was, as you can imagine, really frustrating. So that was really the catalyst for me. It started in my early 20s where I started to make a lot of shifts, and the rest is kind of history. I ended up here doing this work because I feel so passionate about empowering women to understand what's going on in their bodies, because when you don't know, you're afraid of it. And young women today, we need this information. We need it because it has the power to change our lives.
Yeah. Well, you think back in more ancient times when there was like the red tent, and I think there was a lot more community and education in like the women's stories and how they bonded, and I remember I remember one day coming into my bedroom and having a book on my bed, right? And it's like the birds and the bees, and this is what your cycle is, and these cartoon drawings. And so it's so, you're so right how we have very little education and information about what this is a huge part of our lives.
Yes.
Every month for a great span of time.
Yes. A couple thousand days easily, basically, of menstruation. So, it's massive. I got a book too, by the way. So I can definitely relate to that. I know. And there really is, just to build on what you just said, there really is such a lack of education in our culture. And there's also not only that, but it's coupled with shame and a lot of embarrassment around how our body's basic functions. And it's so upsetting to me because I just really hope and wish for young girls to know what this special time is, and to really be able to learn how to honor it. And I feel like it's slowly shifting. Like, they've called 2015 the year of the period. And
really?
It's really, we're getting there. Things are changing. But it really does, you still talk to people, and most people will make jokes about PMS and joke about your period and all this stuff. And it really isn't, it's not really anything to be laughing about. It's really something that I think is quite an incredible experience. And we should be able to take care of ourselves and not feel ashamed of how our bodies function.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I know that you work primarily with younger women, so they're in their teens, 20s, and 30s. So are you finding that there's some unique hormonal health challenges that they're facing that we didn't have, say, 30 years ago?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that what we don't realize is that there have been really remarkable shifts in the last just 50 years in terms of the food that we eat and the stress that we experience in our lives and just the go, go, go busyness. And women, unfortunately, are just more sensitive to stress than men are. And I hate to admit it, but it's the fact. It's just because of our hormonal makeup. So, and because of that, we end up being more prone to the effects of it. And ultimately, what that means is for girls who are, much younger, obviously like 10-year-olds, they're the ones that are feeling that more than any of us at this point. I feel like their stress levels of even children are far surpass what we even experienced just like 15, 20 years ago when we were kids. And now what I'm finding is that really young girls have pretty major hormonal imbalances. And I mean, that is unprecedented as far as I'm concerned. And so what I see is not only the stress component, but there's a birth control aspect where, girls were not being put on the birth control pill at 14 years old, 20, 30 years ago. It just wasn't happening. And now it's happening. I mean, I'm hearing of 11-year-olds being put on a birth control pill or some other kind of hormonal, I know, right? I know. It's just so crazy. I can hear it. I can see it in your voice. It's just like, it's crazy, but it's happening. And what is so unfortunate is that our bodies aren't developed until our late teens. So we're spending almost a decade developing our endocrine system and all of this reproductive function while being manipulated by these hormonal birth control pills and things like that. And what is ultimately happening is we're emerging from all of this with even more hormonal chaos happening in our bodies. And it's really quite difficult to start to address it and reverse it. It's not impossible, but it really is becoming the norm to have some kind of, period-related issue or infertility problem at a relatively young age. I mean, I'm seeing women in their 20s who are on, who are doing IVF, and because they have a combination of hormonal birth control, poor food choices, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of us as children don't even have control over the food we're eating anyway. And then there's the stress component, and all of these things are just like a perfect storm for our menstrual and reproductive health.
Mm-hmm.
It's really unfortunate.
What's your theory on the GMOs?
Yeah, those GMOs. I mean, that's actually another one. I was going to throw that in there too, but I figured I wouldn't keep ranting and raving. But yeah, GMOs are, there are quite a few there's a lot of evidence now, really. And there are quite a few films that highlight this evidence too, to basically explain how they're affecting us and why. And what my opinion is that, just based on my research, is that they're really impacting our health. And what's interesting is that it's when they were introduced in the late 90s, that's a generation that you see all these major problems in. I mean, a lot of the learning disorders, a lot of the physical health issues, the emotional things, ADD, the ADHD, and this autism situation that really is, to me, out of control right now. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's not the only thing, but I think that what we don't do is take into account just the myriad factors that contribute to all of these kinds of health issues in general. GMOs are one part of it, obviously. And, of course, there's all the other factors that I mentioned too. But when it comes to GMOs, I think the problem is that, we have no labeling in the US, which is really unfortunate. And then also too, they're so pervasive. I mean, we can't really escape them. It's very difficult to avoid eating genetically modified food in the U.S. Mm-hmm. because it's grown everywhere. And seeds, of course, blow all over the place and then pollinate other seeds. So it's what happens. And glyphosate, which is the ingredient in the pesticide Roundup, that is what has been found to be a major endocrine disruptor. It mimics estrogen in our body. So we're really living in a very estrogenic environment. And this, of course, is having a really profound impact on women's health because it's shifting the scales to more estrogen dominance. And estrogen dominance leads to a lot of conditions like fibroids and endometriosis, PMS, heavier, painful periods, and then a whole host of other things like breast cancer. I mean, the list goes on and on. Mm-hmm. And for men, it's very similar too, in that, men are also in the same boat where they're being feminized. I mean, I'm just blown away by how many testosterone replacement drugs are on the market now. It's shocking. And there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. And I think a huge part of it comes back to these endocrine disrupting chemicals that are in our environment.
As you were talking, I'm just thinking to myself because one of the things I do is I help women attract their soulmate. And that is something I've noticed in the last, 10 years, is this shift, this dynamic that men are definitely becoming more feminized.
And so interesting that you've noticed this.
Oh, yes. And so talking about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, it makes it so clear that this is what's going on. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. But
it's so crazy. Oh my God, me too.
Yeah. So okay, I understand that our menstrual cycle is kind of a window into our health. So can you talk about that?
Oh, most definitely. I think that one of my colleagues, Dr. Laura Bryden, she says that your period is like your monthly report card. And it's really the truth. I mean, I just really think that, again, we have become so disconnected from our true essence, what it means to actually be a woman and to have a healthy functioning menstrual cycle. We're so disconnected from that and from our bodies in general that, we're sort of hovering somewhere out there and our bodies are on the ground. And what I think is that we, as women, need to take ownership of that and take ownership of our health and our well-being. That's the only way I think that we'll be able to affect change when it comes to our health. And so with your menstrual cycle, what I think it's important to understand is that when you have a healthy menstrual cycle, meaning that it's coming every month and it's lasting for a certain number of days and, you don't have many major symptoms that come with it, then that to me indicates really good overall health. And so for women who don't have a period, for instance, that indicates to me a pretty major hormonal imbalance. Something's going on somewhere. Either your sex hormones aren't at the levels they need to be, or your brain isn't communicating with your ovaries the way it's supposed to be to tell your ovaries to produce an egg and then ultimately menstruate each month. There's so many different things it can indicate. It can indicate a thyroid problem. It can indicate something going on with your pelvic area, your uterus. I mean, all of these different things. And again, we're just not taught this concept of body literacy, which is to really have a good command of what is happening in our bodies, like what the signs and symptoms are of a particular imbalance or just generally something being wrong. And so ultimately we just ignore them until they become things that we can't ignore. And I think many women just believe that their bodies are, broken or beyond repair, or they just, it's like, whatever, this is my lot in life. I'm just going to deal with it. And what I think is unfortunate about that is that we're just missing all the signs because we're not taught, again, this concept of body literacy, which is to really read or understand the language that your body is speaking in. And when we have a better understanding of that, which is what I, empower women to do, I empower them to really see what's going on, then, you can make a lot better decisions, more informed decisions about your health. You can participate actively in your healthcare. Whereas I see a lot of women just going to the doctor, taking their body to the doctor like you take the car to the mechanic. I mean, just saying, okay, doc, just fix me, give me whatever pill or surgery I need so I can be on my way because I'm really busy.
Right.
And I think that if women could just, again, understand that their period is like the first sign. I mean, your reproductive function. I kind of like to liken it to the canary in the coal mine scenario where, if women's bodies especially, because when something starts to go awry, we're the most sensitive and canaries are the most sensitive. And so we're the most sensitive to these kinds of disruptors in our lives, whether it's the food or the stress or whatever else. And once something goes wrong with your menstrual cycle, it's definitely indicative of another problem happening in your body. And it's a great sign to understand.
What about PMDD?
Oh, yes.
PMDD. Yeah, let's just say what it is in case, yes. People don't know what it is.
I know, right? A lot of people aren't familiar with it. So PMDD is PMS's meaner, bigger sister, basically, and it stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And essentially, it doesn't affect nearly as many women as something like PMS does. It only affects a few percentage points of the women who suffer from PMS. And essentially, what it is just really heightened PMS. So you turn into a raging, crazy person, essentially, every single month, or the 3 to 5 days leading up to your period. And for some women, it actually is up all the way to the 2 weeks before their period. So right after ovulation, there is a dip in estrogen. And so your estrogen drops pretty significantly. And what ultimately happens is, for many women, this triggers these bouts of anxiety and depression and feelings of overwhelm and anger and bitterness and all kinds of stuff. And I think that it's really interesting because PMS, PMDD, all of these things are viewed as these horrible conditions that we need to medicate away. It's incredible that nearly 30% of American women are on some kind of antidepressant, and a huge portion of them are on them for things like this. And ultimately, what I really want women to understand is that if your hormones are, if your estrogen is dropping that drastically and impacting you in that way, then you've got to look a little bit deeper and figure out what's going on, like what's causing that to happen. You don't want to medicate yourself in that kind of way, because it's just like a blanket approach and it's really just a one size fits all. What I find is once you start to stabilize your blood sugar, that's a huge part of it. You will find that your mood swings are going to stabilize too. This is not one of those things that you can't control and you have no control over at all. It's really one of those things you can get a rein on. It's just a matter of stabilizing your blood sugar, eating foods that aren't going to make you go crazy, like tons of sugar, chocolate, refined carbohydrates in those 2 weeks leading up to your period. And then also looking a little bit deeper to see why all those emotions are coming up in the first place. What's triggering them? What's happened throughout the month that, you might not have been too bothered by around ovulation that is now coming up for you again? Like, what's triggering these kinds of emotions? I think that's a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell you I've personally experienced PMDD. And
figured.
Yeah.
Figured you asked because you probably had it.
Yeah. And it's so true. It's like you can feel it coming on.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things too that, I get that we don't have control over everything that happens to us each month. And I always tell women, you're going to start to get your hormones under control, balance them, all of that stuff. But you really have to keep in mind that we're cyclical beings. We're not going to be the same every single day. Men are completely different in that way, in that respect. And for us, we need to really honor that we go up and down. And I'm reading this incredible book right now by this woman. I think her name's Julie Holland. She wrote Moody Bitches, and it's phenomenal. And she's talking about the fact that this is how we're made, and if we don't get in touch with that and we continue to fight it, we're just going to end up being even more miserable. Mm-hmm. And we may live in a man's world, but we do not operate like men, and we are not men. And we need to just like really get back in tune with those cycles that happen internally and really honor them, and really just respect that there are some days where we're going to be pissed and not happy and tired and maybe, a little uncomfortable. And then there are other days that we're going to have boundless energy. And it's totally okay. But I think we judge ourselves way too hard in these instances.
Well, because I think that we have been socialized that we need to have a smile on our face and don't be bitchy, or don't get too enthusiastic about, declaring things too strongly. Otherwise, you sound mean and...
Oh, yes. I know, right? Isn't it crazy how many times we're labeled as bossy and bitchy and all these other things when men could say the exact same thing and be labeled a hero? But, that's a whole other story. But I just think it's really interesting how the gender roles play out, especially in the corporate world. And I mean, I probably wouldn't survive a day in corporate America.
No,
because it seems so challenging. But I will say that, again, we have to take a look at what's causing that. And I think for so many women too, we're not taught from the time we're young how to express anger, how to manage it, how to feel anything that's negative. I had a friend recently, an ex-boyfriend of hers basically told her she was upset about something, and he told her that girls look much prettier when they're not angry. And I was like, oh my God, did he really pull that line out on you? Come on. And I mean, it's just nuts, but that really is so pervasive.
Wow.
No. Can you believe that?
No, I can't.
I know. I was like, thank God he's your ex-boyfriend.
Oh my God.
Anyways.
Yeah. So, one of my past guests, Jay Yoder, she was raving about you, and that's why I was so excited to have you join me on the show. And she was talking about how it's like you have a program, or you talk about teaching us how to use our cycle to plan our what we do in our businesses, our sex life, all these different things. So let's talk about that, because that sounds like super juicy and super fun.
It is. It's so cool. I love Jay.
Yeah.
It's so awesome just to, now that I look back at how much I struggled through all of my cyclical woes back in the day. And now, I mean, it's all in my calendar. So it's just, it's perfect. So what I want women to understand is, as I was saying before, that we're so cyclical by nature. And, when you look at the outside, the seasons outside, the winter, the spring, the summer, the fall, what we can do is start to, turn inwards a little bit and check in with our own cycles, because really what's happening on a monthly basis is mirroring what happens on a yearly basis externally. And so for women who don't understand what I'm trying to say, basically what I'm saying is that our period is representative of winter time. Our our follicular phase, which is the first part of our cycle, is representative of spring, and then ovulation is summer, and then fall is that luteal phase. So I'll start with our period, because usually that's the first thing that's happening. Day one of our cycle is our period, basically the first day of our menstrual cycle, and then it goes through the follicular phase. And so the follicular phase is a phase where there's lots of growth and things like that happening. That's why we liken it to the spring season. And the follicular phase is a time when the egg is sort of getting ripened. Essentially, it's getting ready for ovulation. The brain is talking to the ovaries and telling our ovaries to produce estrogen and really like build up our uterine lining. So there's lots of growth happening. There's lots of things. Things are busy. And then as we move more into the ovulatory phase, which is a shorter time, what happens is the egg is really just getting primed. It's getting ready to be released by the ovary. And in going back into the follicular phase, what we're experiencing on a physical and emotional level is that we're starting to get more energy, because during your period, you really just want to be calm, quiet, not have too much stimulation, really take things off your calendar and your to-do list and try and build rest into your days and self-care into your days. Eat really nourishing foods, maybe take a bath, just take care of yourself the best way you know how. Like you might take care of a child, essentially, because those days I think are the sacred days. We really want to preserve our energy as much as possible, because our hormones are at their lowest at that time and our bodies are really just asking for rest. And a lot of women say this to me, but I'm so tired during this time. And I'm like, you are supposed to be. This is just how it's supposed to be. Just so you know.
Like, I can't get any work done.
I know, right? And I'm like, just don't even fight it. Just don't get any work done. Surrender to what it is that your body is asking you to do. And then moving into that follicular phase, so you start to build up energy. Your hormones are building, like I said, estrogen and testosterone. And once you are in that follicular phase, you really start to feel more social, like you want to do more things. Exercise becomes more strenuous at that point. All kinds of social things start to happen. At work, when you're moving into ovulation, work time is a time for speaking up in meetings, for just public speaking in general, or asking for a raise, or maybe even doing a job interview or any kind of interview for that matter. All of these different things are what you should be attempting to do during this time of your cycle, because your speaking skills, your thinking skills, everything is really in tip-top shape because of estrogen and testosterone. They just get you going. They build up your confidence and your ability to really take charge. And so I love that time of our cycles, because we all have a lot of energy for pretty much everything at that point.
So is that our summer or is that our spring?
So that's spring going into summer. So that's follicular going into the ovulation time. And so that's, springtime into summertime. And so, of course, summertime is very similar. You really, again, are at the top of your game. And estrogen's great, too, because it turns up your sex drive. So does testosterone. And again, you're a lot more bold. So I recommend going on dates. Like I say that anyone who's single should do that, or you should schedule date night if you're in a relationship. Because again, this is the time when your sex drive is really going to be highest for the most part, because estrogen and testosterone are peaking at this time. And when you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, our bodies just want to make babies. Yeah. It's just how it is. So be careful if you're trying not to have babies, just so you know. And if you are, then don't be careful. But it is such a great time, because we are really able to get a lot of things done in terms of like work and to-do lists. And we're very, what's the word I'm looking for? We're just very effective at getting things accomplished. And then
sorry to interrupt you, but I imagine we're a lot more magnetic and attractive.
Yes.
That's
what I was going to say. Estrogen changes your complexion. Yeah. It makes you more glowy. And if women don't recognize this, they should pay attention the next time they're ovulating. But if you're walking down the street, men will literally stare at you. It's incredible. It's the power of our pheromones. And we have forgotten that even existed. But seriously, pay attention the next time you're ovulating. It's the coolest thing ever. It's really amusing, actually. But that really does happen. And they have no idea what the heck's going on. But they just keep on looking and checking out girls when they're ovulating. Unbeknownst to why. They don't know why, but it's all good. So that's like really what's happening at this time. And then as you move from ovulation into the luteal phase, your estrogen and testosterone drop pretty quickly, and you sort of still feel those residual effects of all that you've been feeling, all the good that you've been feeling over the last like 7 to 10 days. And then what happens is you start to really think about winding down. So I find that women tend to just become more sensitive during the luteal phase. Yeah. And we're at the point where we've had lots of fun in the spring and summer, and now we're ready to just take care of ourselves, take care of our personal to-do lists. I find that this time is great for accounting and bookkeeping. I don't know, that skill set is just really predominant during this time of your cycle. And so I get a lot of the internal business things done. So you really want to focus on sort of the internal to-dos rather than the external things that you've been dealing with in the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And as you get closer to your period, that is heightened. You really tend to wind down more. You become more reflective. A lot of women find that leading up to their period, they feel they feel a lot of tension, and they also feel a lot of anxiety. They're just ready for this release, for their period to come. And that's okay. It's completely normal to have that feeling. I think that where PMS and even PMDD arise is not only in a hormonal imbalance, but where women are not happy with certain situations in their lives, whether it's their job or their relationship or whatever is going on that that you're not happy with or satisfied with, it usually shows up emotionally in those 5 days. I mean, I've seen it over and over again, even in myself and with many clients and friends, especially when it comes to relationships. They take every single thing out on that other person during those 5 to 7 days leading up to their period. And I'm just like, okay, you got to look a little bit deeper at what's going on here, because there's a reason that you pretty much want to kill this person. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a reason for that. So I think it's really, really important for us to check that out. But I feel that also too, it's a strength. It's a strength because it's our intuition. It's showing us that we're intuitive beings and that we're just not tapping into it, or we're not paying attention to it. So I think with hormonal imbalances in general, what women need to know is that our bodies are not broken. It's just our body's way of telling us that something's going on. And with PMS and PMDD, it's the same situation. Our body's just saying, okay, you need to pay attention to this. Mm-hmm. And we're going to keep screaming louder and louder until you do. And so it's not a sign of it being broken or anything being broken necessarily. It's just a sign of things actually working really well internally. And you just need to start paying attention to whatever that is that your body's asking you to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love this, how we can map out our life and really plan it within our cycle. I mean,
isn't that so cool?
That just is so empowering, and to be able to use that cycle, our cycle, to really maximize our own energy and use the pheromones for it sounds like that's a good time for marketing or.
Yes.
Yeah. And then what about creation of something?
Yes. Well, I will say the marketing, like you said, that's so true. At that time of the month, I really am all about launching programs and really, if you own a business and really putting yourself out there, that's the time to do it. And then for the creative process, it really is the time, the luteal phase. So leading up to your period, that's governed by progesterone. So once estrogen and testosterone drop, progesterone picks up, and it's a heat-inducing hormone. So it actually raises your basal body temperature, and that's how women, sometimes chart their cycles. It's how I've been charting my cycle. And what's awesome about progesterone is that it brings up all of these creative powers. And what I find is when we start to tap into that, writing blog posts or writing a book or whatever it is that we're trying to create is really, this is just the best time to really focus on that. And I mean, it makes so much sense. Progesterone is helping you to create a baby, essentially. And so that second half of your cycle really is that time of creation. And even if it might be bringing life into this world, or it might just be bringing a business into this world, or whatever it is that you're focused on right now. Use that time to go a little inward. And like I said, you're not so busy with all the external things that are happening because you've likely cleared your calendar a little bit, and you're more focused on what can I bring forth into the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I don't know if you said this already, but how many days are each cycle?
Each phase of your cycle? It depends. So obviously for your period, and just so that everyone knows, a regular period really should be between about 3 to 7 days. And around 5 days is my ideal. And so that's the menstrual cycle, or that's the menstrual phase. If it's less than 3 days, it's likely indicative of your hormones being too low, your sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. If it's over 7 days, then you might have too much estrogen, and so it's causing a lot heavier, longer period. So that phase lasts about that amount of time. And then we move into the follicular phase. Really, the follicular phase starts on day 1 of your cycle too. So it just spans until ovulation. So it's not really that they're specifically different. I just like to say that so that it can differentiate between the different phases. Mm-hmm. But the follicular phase is about 10 to 14 days long, just depending on how, when you ovulate. And so I really think that ovulation should occur somewhere between days 13 and 17 of your cycle, and that will determine when you get your period. So you basically have to get your period 12 to 16 days after you've ovulated. And if you don't get your period, it's likely that you've not ovulated. So ovulation, so the follicular phase is about 10 to 14 days, and then ovulation pretty much comes in the middle of that. And then the luteal phase is about 10 to 14 days as well, typically. So all in all is like a cycle of anywhere from 25 to 35 days is considered average or normal. And for women who have longer cycles, then it's likely that their ovulation is a little bit sporadic, and they should really check that out. And then for women who have shorter cycles, it's likely they're ovulating too early, and or their luteal phase, that second half of your cycle, is too short. And if it's too short, you want to lengthen it, because especially if you're trying to get pregnant, just because what happens is the fertile window, the egg needs about 10 to 14 days to travel from the fallopian tube into the uterus and implant. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't have that amount of time and you happen to get your period on the 9 days later after ovulation, you might miss the opportunity to get pregnant. So it's one of those things that, again, it's all leads back to an underlying hormonal imbalance. It's just a matter of correcting that, which is relatively easy. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. So I don't want to leave anyone out. So let's talk about what happens. I know you focus more on younger women, but what happens after, say, with premenopause and menopause? So I'm wondering, for those ladies, if they also can use this same kind of system to plan out their life or their business or whatever. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think they can. I mean, perimenopause doesn't mean that your period is going away anytime soon by any means. It really just typically indicates that ovulation is starting to become a little bit more sporadic, or it's starting to, just sort of waver a little bit, but it doesn't mean that you're not getting your period. I mean, a lot of women I know, are getting their period up into their late 40s, early 50s. It's just, it depends on your genetic makeup and a lot of different factors. Anyway, what I find is that, you can obviously use this, even if your cycles are irregular, your follicular phase might be a bit longer, or your luteal phase might be a little bit longer or shorter, but you can still use all of these tools in your cycle. It's just, you might use them for a little bit longer, or a little bit shorter than someone who has a more regular cycle. And that's totally fine. And if you wanted to, you could even use the moon cycle, because it basically syncs up really perfectly with our menstrual cycle, in that the new moon is representative of your period, and then that phase between the new moon and the half moon the full moon is the follicular phase, and then the luteal phase. The follicular phase, and then the luteal phase comes after the full moon, and then back to the new moon. So it's one of those things where if we sync up with that cycle, that's another great way to do it. I always recommend women who are in menopause, who have really sporadic periods, like maybe 1 or 2 a year, or aren't getting their period anymore at all, to sync with the moon cycle. And even girls who are younger and not getting their periods, I ask them to do that. So to do all those rituals in the same way that you would just in sync with the cycle of the moon. Yeah.
this conversation has really like shifted my perspective around my cycle and how I can really, like I said earlier, use it, and it feels much more empowering. So I
Mm.
think that's awesome. I'm wondering if there's anything you feel left unsaid, anything that you want to say to
The audience. Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up by saying that I really believe that feeling good, feeling great in your body as a woman it should be inherent. It should be something that we're entitled to. And I think that so many of us feel that we're not. And it's just, again, like I said before, this is our lot in life and we just have to deal with it. And I really want women to know that they have so much control over what goes on, what goes into their bodies and what goes on in their bodies. And it's just a matter of, like I said, tuning into the signs that your body is, or the signals that your body is sending to you, and really working with her rather than against her, especially if you decide to sync with the cycles of the moon or just the cycles or your cycle that's happening every single month.
Mm-hmm.
So just so everyone knows, you can take charge of your hormonal health.
Fantastic. And I understand you have a great gift for the listeners. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I do. I have a PDF. It's a PDF handout, and it's called a Stress Less Toolkit. And it's about 10 pages long, and it really is a guide for women on the right supplements and some different things to do to really help to mitigate stress, especially during this time of the year. And it's also, it's got some really great options for food as well to keep your blood sugar stable, because keep in mind, if your insulin is all over the place, your cortisol, which is a stress hormone, will be too. Mm-hmm. So it's really just a comprehensive guide on how to address any kind of stress that you're experiencing, and just some like really specific tools that are really great for women only.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so I understand you have some different programs. So tell the listeners how that they can connect with you and engage and find out more.
Totally. You can check out my website. I'm at NicoleJardim.com, and I have a great blog on there. I talk about a ton of different topics, everything related to your period and hormonal health and menstruation, everything. It's like the list goes on and on. I had somebody say the other day that they felt like they were reading an encyclopedia of periods, which made me laugh a little bit, because I really like to get into the science and translate that for women, because I know that nobody has time for that. They don't have time to read all this in-depth information on why these things are happening. So I really try to give them the straight talk and show people that this is actually really not as hard to understand as you might have thought it is. And there are some really easy solutions as well. So that's on the blog. And then my program is called Fix Your Period. And I have two different tracks actually for women who are dealing with one end of the spectrum and then the other end of the spectrum, essentially. So the first track is for women who are dealing with PMS, PMDD, endometriosis, fibroids, heavy, painful periods, all those kinds of conditions that are linked to an estrogen dominant situation or an underactive thyroid. Whereas on the flip side, track 2 is for women who are dealing with no periods or very irregular sporadic periods, or have very low sex drive, low sex hormones, things like that. So there are two tracks, and yeah, that's an e-course as well as a live course that I offer twice a year. So there are options.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about ladies that are maybe trying to get pregnant, but maybe they're finding that a little challenging, or they just want a great start from the get-go?
Yes. I mean, my programs are perfect for that. I don't say that I'm solely fertility or anything like that, but at the end of the day, your period is intricately connected, obviously, to your fertility. So it's really a matter of preparing your body in the most appropriate way to either get pregnant or stay pregnant, or if you're dealing with miscarriages. And so that's what my programs do. I go through a whole protocol where women learn exactly how to balance their blood sugar. They learn exactly how to cleanse their liver, because your liver is also connected to your hormonal health. And there's a gut healing protocol too, because that is also tied in. And then I talk about the things I just talked about, where you're syncing with your cycle, you're tracking your cycle, you're really learning to understand what all your body's trying to tell you. And it's very comprehensive. So it's really a program about lifestyle and food and targeted supplementation for anyone, whether you're dealing with period problems or you're having a fertility issue. So it covers everyone pretty much.
Incredible. This conversation has been so amazing. I mean, it was
Thank you.
much more fun and exciting than I ever imagined.
I know. Can you believe periods can be fun?
I know. Oh my gosh. I'm totally going to like get my calendar out and I'm going to start mapping things because I really believe that would really help me out because I think I've just kind of been doing everything at all times. And so, yeah, excellent. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. This is great.
Yeah, awesome. Yay. Get the goddesses going. Woo!
Exactly.
All right. And now for you, my gorgeous goddess, was there something that Nicole or I shared that resonated with you? If so, we'd love to hear about it. Head on over to today's show page at theawakenedgoddess.com and leave us a comment. Did you enjoy this episode? If so, subscribe to the show and please share it with your friends. And if you want even more incredible resources, join the Awakened Goddess community to get Nicole's gift and bonus content from the show. And until next time, goodbye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. I hope you enjoyed today's guest and got something you can start using in your life right away. For more spiritual insights and to listen to more episodes, subscribe to The Awakened Goddess Show at theawakenedgoddess.com and discover wisdom that'll change your life.